back to Andersen Acres. We're here in the kitchen again, and today we are going to make garlic and onion rolls. They're kind of like cinnamon buns, but not. They're savory instead of sweet. They're really easy to make, a lot of fun, and they are quite delicious. So we're going to start making our dough. Our dough is similar to our white bread dough with a couple of little tweaks. For one, we're going to use an egg. My regular white bread dough does not contain egg. This one does need an egg. So crack yourself an egg. Put that in your bread pan. You can do this by hand. I'm using my bread pan because the bread pan happens not to have anything in it. So you're also going to want 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter. You can use margarine if you like. You won't really notice the difference in this recipe. You're going to want a teaspoon of salt, Himalayan salt in my case, but use whatever you have, and 1/8 of a cup of sugar. It is a little more sugar than is in a lot of my recipes, but you do need it. It offsets the savoriness of the filling. Now we're going to need some water, just 1 cup. 1 cup of water is plenty. There we go. Now we need our flours. We're going to use 1 cup of whole wheat, easy, easy, and 2 cups of all-purpose. Get all that out of there. And there we go. Now we need yeast. We are using 1 heaping teaspoon of bread machine yeast because I'm using my bread machine to make this. If you are doing this by hand, you can use traditional yeast and dissolve it in your warm water mixed with some sugar. So that's all our ingredients. We're not doing anything fancy with this particular dough. We're going to pop this in our bread maker and come back in about 1.5 hours because it'll have finished its first rise. If you're doing this by hand, you will knead your dough by hand, set it aside to rise for about 1 hour, and then we'll continue on with the recipe. So we'll be back in about 1.5 hours. All right, so our dough is looking great. That should be how it looks. Nice stretchy dough. Should feel kind of like a marshmallow. So place that aside. We don't need it for this very second. We are going to need it in a minute though. You're going to get yourself just your regular cake pan. This is like 9 by 13 or thereabouts. Doesn't matter that much. You just need something to put your buns in. We are going to use just a canola oil cooking spray. Just give that a spray. Nice spray. This is glass pan, so I have to use a fair amount of spray just because we do not want these sticking. Now you're going to set this aside. You're going to need it in a minute. Now we have to make our filling. Remember, this is a garlic and onion roll. So we're going to need about 1/8 of a cup or so of melted butter. Do melt it. Melted butter, yummy. Do not use margarine. No margarine. Now we're going to need a mix of garlic powder and onion powder. I am using 2 teaspoons of garlic powder and 1 teaspoon of onion powder. You can change those ratios a bit. The important thing is that there's a total of 3 teaspoons of powder here. So you're either going to want garlic powder or onion powder, some mix of the two. We prefer more garlic, so we'll use 2 teaspoons of the garlic powder, mix that in, and 1 teaspoon of the onion powder. But you can change those ratios a little bit. So if you really love onion powder, you could do 2 teaspoons of onion powder and 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, no problem. Next we're going to add, it depends how much Parmesan cheese you want. I'm adding 2 tablespoons, but you could add more if you want more. Don't add too much, it'll make it hard to spread. So no more than 4 tablespoons. I'm adding 2 tablespoons. Now you're going to want 1 teaspoon of poppy seeds. Yeah, we like poppy seeds. Poppy seeds are delicious. And then because we do want this to be full of flavor, we are going to get 1 teaspoon of salt. I am using Himalayan salt. You can use any salt you like, but 1 teaspoon of salt. That's all. That's our filling. Give that a mix. You'll see how that cheese helps thicken it up. That's why we put the Parmesan in there. Set that aside for a minute. Now we're going to get our dough. Give your dough a stretch because you're going to need almost like a cinnamon bun to roll this out. So I'm going to use my rolling pin. And we're just going to use the rolling pin to push a lot of that air out. Yes, hear that? Squish. There we go. You just want, there we go. Get that air out first of all. And then just, oops, I am using, by the way, this rolling pin has the graduation on the side, so I can control the depth. So I have it set to a 1/2 inch. You can use just a standard rolling pin. It doesn't have to be this same one. So I'm just controlling it to about a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to use my hands. I will put a link to this rolling pin because people keep asking every time it turns up in a video. Even though it's not crucial to this video, you could do this with your hands, but I'm just doing that to get it to an even thickness. Now you're going to want to stretch your dough to the appropriate size. So an appropriate size here is going to be, it doesn't matter too much, but I'm going with about 18 inches. I went to 19 here only because I'm not all the way at 0 on this side. So about 18 inches or so by, doesn't really matter, 12 inches, something like that. The exact dimensions don't matter that much, as long as it's a fairly even thickness throughout, but you do want a decent length, okay? Press that down. That's why this dough is slightly sticky. That's why we added an egg. It allows it to kind of stay out a little bit more so that it doesn't contract too much. It sticks to your mat. Not sticks a lot. I mean, you can take it off, no problem. It's not that. It's just that it allows you to press it down and it kind of stays in place. Now we're going to take our topping, dump the whole thing on there. It doesn't really matter how you do this. You just dump it. It's not really that big a deal. This is an easy recipe. Now we're just going to spread our filling. You do not want to go all the way to the edge. You can go all the way to this edge, but the edge facing away from you, you don't want to go all the way to it. So you're going to want to leave an inch or an inch and a half. Just spread your butter. This is a delicious recipe. It smells so good. I know you can't smell it through a camera, but it smells so good. So you just get this going. Remember, not all the way to that edge. You need to leave this edge bare so that you can stick your roll together. There we go. Try to give an even amount of coverage, so if you have nothing over here, spread it around. You just do want an even amount here. There we go. Looks good to me. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to do a tight roll. You want nice and tight, okay? You don't want a roll that's kind of loosey-goosey. Nice and tight. So kind of pull as you go. And you're going to fold this up. Pinch this really well, because it's going to want to come apart, especially because we squished a little too much. There we go. There we go. Roll side down, seam side down. Looks good. Looking good so far. Now you need a knife. I'm just using a ceramic knife. You can use any sharp knife you have. And we need to divide this into 12. So to divide this into 12, first we're going to divide it into 4. And we're going to divide each of those into 3. So we're dividing that into 12. No big deal. Easy, easy, easy. Just keep your fingers to keep your rolls from getting really smushed. Right? You just hold it with your fingers like so. There we go. That part's done. And yes, it's normal for this to all leak out. Now you're going to need your pan. I'm just going to move that rolling pin. And we're just going to start picking these up and putting them in our pan. So when you're picking up the end pieces, you want to put them end side down. Okay, end side down. That's what we want to do. And you want to put these seam sides facing towards another roll. Okay? It's just easier. So then we're going to do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's good. This is fine. You can roll your rolls in that. It's not a big deal. That's 9. 10. It's totally normal for this all to leak out. Not a big deal. 11. Again, this is an end piece, so you want to put that one side down. You put the nicer side up. Then we're going to grab our basting brush and kind of just pick up this, all this stuff, and kind of put it on top. That's why it doesn't matter if it squishes out, because you're going to pick it up. Now, you're not going to be able to get all of it, obviously, but putting this on top of your rolls really gives them a little extra flavor. So it doesn't matter if it got all over your mat because you're just going to scoop it up and put it back on. Okay, here we go. So now we're going to set this aside to rise, and it'll take about an hour probably, because you want these to double in size. You want them to get nice and poofy before we bake them. So we're going to set these aside for about an hour, then we'll come back and take a look at them. Well, our buns have risen up. They look nice and fluffy. They have filled out most of the space in the pan. There's a little space left between them that'll fill in as they bake. So we're going to bake these at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 minutes. Check them at 20. You don't want them getting too dark, but you do want them thoroughly cooked. So probably around 25 minutes. We'll come back and check on them. All right, so those are our garlic onion buns. You see, they look just like cinnamon buns, but the swirls in here are full of garlic, onion, and Parmesan cheese, in addition to a few other spices. You can play with the ratio of garlic to onion. You can even do an entirely different filling if you choose. You could do garlic and paprika, for example. These are a fun way to enjoy your favorite rolls. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow.